Hello, class, and welcome to week 9. We are officially at the halfway point of this course. It's moving fast. And we've covered some great material already. We've talked about so many great things that are essential to building a foundation and to being a successful student. But this week's not so much conceptual as more practical. This week, we are definitely looking at a practical approach for you to build quality study skills and how to become an effective note taker for your courses this semester and continuing on here at Chafee and moving on. Now, some of us here, we might feel that, hey, we're actually pretty good at taking notes, but we can't seem to pass a class with a grade higher than a C. But we feel like we have some good study skills. You know, there might be some of us here that feel like, oh, you know what, I'm not really that great at taking notes and studying. That's something I want to work on. And there might be some of you here that maybe have no idea. You might be thinking, I don't know. I mean, I think I study. I take notes when I need to. There might be a spectrum of us here in this class. No matter where you are, I think it's important to always continue to learn. If you feel that you're good at taking notes or studying, there's always strategies and ways to improve. If you feel like, hey, this is an area I need some work on, then this is great because we're going to build some good core foundations in these skills, but also you're going to learn about multiple strategies that you can take with you moving forward. So, the first thing I really want to point out before we dive in is that, taking notes and being a good note taker and being great at studying for your classes, it takes time. And it definitely takes patience, and it's going to take a lot of strategizing. You can't just expect to do well in a class if you don't have the proper study skills and if you don't know how to take notes. These are essential. We got to have these skills if you're going to do well in a class. It's incredibly important. So just know that it does take strategy. This isn't something that you can just start doing. Just start writing. You got to know how you're going to approach this and how you are going to study and how you're going to take notes. And we're going to learn how to do that right now. So really the first step is to become aware of your learning style. And learning style, what we mean by that is, are you a thinking student, a doing student, feeling or innovating? We're referring back to the learning preference inventory that you took 2 weeks ago. So if you all remember, you took a brief little quiz and you just answered some questions about yourself. And you found out at the end which of these areas you scored the most high in. So it's really important to be aware of this, especially because let's say if you are more of a doing, you're more of a kinesthetic learner. You might want to incorporate that into the way you study. So if you like to be hands-on and you like to actually practice what you're learning, you want to bring that into your study skills. If you feel like you're more of a thinking and a reflective type of learner, then that's a way you want to incorporate into your classes and how you study and how you learn. You might want to make sure that you spend enough time reflecting and really soaking in the knowledge. So, that's really the first step, is just to really be aware of your preferred learning style. Now, your preferred learning style isn't just going to take you to becoming an excellent note taker or to develop quality study skills. It's not going to take you there, but it's really just important to be aware of it, just to have that awareness first. So let's keep moving forward here. So we know, we kind of have an idea now. Okay, well, this is what my preferred style of learning. But regardless of your preferred style of learning, it's important to be aware of the learning cycle. Now, in college and when you take classes, it's important to not just memorize concepts and just to repeat it back so you can pass a test and you can move on to the next chapter. That's not really learning. And we've kind of talked about that before. That's not how you learn in a class. Learning an academic subject, really understanding English, really understanding math, really understanding the philosophy class you're in, is to be able to think about it in a meaningful way and to apply that understanding in new situations. It's being able to learn the information and to apply it maybe to real world situations. It's being able to really grasp and understand the material. So how do you do that? How do you really grasp and understand the material instead of just saying, well, I read it a bunch of times and now I memorized it so I can pass the test and now I can move on to next week, but I already forgot everything I just learned the week before. How can we go from that into, oh, I'm really understanding this material and I'm growing as the class moves along, I'm growing. And here's how. It's a cycle. It's called the learning cycle. And you'll see here that there's, four different steps to this learning cycle, and they all just kind of ebb and flow with each other. So the first step is to prepare. You have to be prepared in order to really be able to fully learn and grasp the material. You need to be able to absorb the material. You need to be able to really understand it, to be able to capture it, write it down, be an excellent note-taking student, and then to be able to review and tie it in to what's going on in your daily life, and to be able to summarize the material, and then you go right back into it, preparing, absorbing, capturing, and being able to review. So what do we mean by being prepared? Actually, let's go back here again. By being prepared. Well, this is actually taken from the reading that you're going to do this week, but I think it's a really great example. So think about two different students. One student, we'll say Kirk, okay? Kirk shows up to class and Kirk is not prepared. He shows up 5 minutes before the class starts. He's scrambling in. He sets his notebooks down and he realizes he doesn't even have a pen. So he's scrambling, he's trying to find a pen. He's asking other students, hey, do you have an extra pen I can borrow? He's looking at the material. He realizes he didn't read any of the reading from this past week. And he has no idea what the professor is going to cover this week because he hasn't been looking at the syllabus and he hasn't done any reading for this week either. So he's scrambling. He doesn't know what's about to happen there. He can't figure out what the instructor's talking about. He's trying to connect the material, but he's scrambling. He's stressed out. He wasn't prepared. Now let's take another student. Let's take Monica, for example, okay? So now we got Monica. Monica got a good night rest. She showed up to class 15 minutes early. She's sitting there and she already did the reading, so she had a good wealth of knowledge before showing up to the class. She prepped and prepared for the reading for the upcoming week, so she can highlight some key points and to be well versed in the material that the professor is about to discuss. Now she's got questions she can engage with the professor. She's got her pen and pencil ready to go to take notes. She's sitting up in the front of the class. She's ready. Which one of those two students is going to do well with the lecture and that week's class? Of course, it's the prepared student, right? It's the student who came prepared. That's the first ingredient. You have to be prepared before you start a class. Now, right now we're online, so it's different. You don't actually have to go to a physical environment, but you need to be prepared before each class, just like this one. In order to show up to the new module for the new week, you need to do the week before. You need to be ready for it. You need to look at the syllabus and look at there, and I've got it all laid out. Take a look and see, oh, this week we're going over study skills. Okay, perfect. I'm going to get into the right frame of mind. I'm going to prepare for it. When we go back to campus, it's showing up to class on time, getting the right amount of sleep. It's being prepared. Now, the next step is absorbing the material. So absorbing the material is actually being able to take in new ideas and information or different experiences. This is what happens when a student is actively listening in the class. We're going to talk about how to be an active listener, but it's actually taking the material and being open to really, truly being present in that moment and listening. So that means putting away all other distractions, putting your phone away, not being tempted to look at the score, the Lakers score, which, by the way, excellent victory tonight. Go Lakers. But being able to put away all other distractions and be present in the moment and really soaking in what the professor, what the lecture, and what the discussion's taking place. That's absorbing the material, is being there in the moment. Capturing the material, the next step here, that's actually taking notes. So this refers to being able to take good notes, which we're going to talk about today. We're going to discuss some different strategies. But capturing the material means you need to become an effective note taker. You need to know how to take proper notes. That's how you're going to be able to fully capture the material. So not only do you have to be prepared for class, not only do you need to be present to be able to absorb the material and be open to new ideas, but you need to be able to capture and write down everything that's going on, and to be able to not only capture it, but continue to listen and absorb while you're capturing the material. The last step is to review, which means to, after you've taken the notes, you've absorbed and you've been prepared, now it's to take all of that information and review it and be able to start connecting it to different ideas. That means watch the videos, read the articles, listen to the lecture and start connecting it. Review the information of what you've discovered, and to be able to see, okay, am I understanding this material? Do I have questions? Write those questions down and get back into it. And it's okay, I have a question here. Go to the professor, talk to a classmate about it. But it's summarizing the material. This is where you really need to fully understand. Did I understand this week's learning? If you did, great, you understand it, you write it down, you move on to the next. If you didn't, like I said, talk to your professor, engage with other students, and we start the cycle again. We prepare for the next class, absorb the material, capture, take notes, and review. It's constant. You continue to do this. So this is the learning cycle. This is how you can fully, truly understand the material, not just memorize and finish a test so you can just move on with the class. It's fully grasping the material, the learning cycle. Okay, so here's a couple of just really good important tips that I got from the reading this week that I think was really good to highlight. And the first step, sorry about that, is to get your mind in the right space. What does that mean? That means being present, like we've talked about, but it's before the class, getting into mindset, right? Having a growth mindset and saying, hey, I'm jumping into this class. I'm going to be present. I'm going to have a positive attitude. I'm going to do well in this class. And starting to get there. Okay, so this week we're going to be talking about study skills. Okay, I need to get ready to learn about study skills. So it's just preparing your mind. Number 2, get yourself in the right space. So this means physically where to sit. So right now online, I know it's different, but when we get back on campus, sit towards the front of the room where you can make eye contact with the professor so you can really read his or her body language and to be able to sit up in the front and be able to discuss and talk with other students. If you sit towards the front of the class, chances are you're going to be paying more attention. If you sit towards the back of the class, it's a little bit harder to listen to. You're not towards the front. You might be more tempted to get distracted. Prepare to be in the physical right space. Number 3, focus on what is being said. Sounds simple, right? But it's so important. This is going back to what I was mentioning earlier. You need to get rid of any distractions before class or during class. You have to be able to clear your mind. Be aware of what's going on in that class, and nothing else should be mattering right now. It's what is being said. That is the most important thing. And I love the article. I love what they use in the article. Think like an investigative reporter. You don't want to just accept what's being said. You want to be able to question the material and be convinced that it makes sense. Pretend like you're interviewing someone. Would you just sit there and, yeah, that's great. Okay, I wrote it all down, thanks. No, if you were an investigative reporter, you would need to really pay attention and focus, gather all that information, but also you need to be able to understand what that person is saying, because later you're going to disseminate that information and share it out. So you need to have that mindset of like a reporter. Number 4, look for signals. This is also important too. You need to look for signals from your professor. Your professors are going to emphasize and they're going to highlight specific key terms. This is important. Some professors are going to put up on the board everything you need to know for a test. They're going to say, okay, this is important. You need to know this for the upcoming midterm. Some professors won't do that. You're going to have some professors that are just going to lecture. Once the class is over, they're going to grab their briefcase and they're out. So you need to know how to look for signals for important information that could come back into a test or an assignment later. So, keep aware of some things. Some professors, they might repeat an idea or rephrase an idea. That's a signal. So if they're repeating a key term, that's important. You need to write that down. Another key term too is they might raise or lower their voice. So if they're raising their voice and they're really getting adamant on a subject, that could be pretty important. You might need to note that down. That could possibly be on a test. Some teachers might write a key term on the board. That's important. You need to write that down. You need to take note of that. So you need to figure out what signals the professors are giving off on the material. How can you know what signals are happening? You need to be focused on what is being said first. But before that, you need to be in the right space, and your mind needs to be in the right space. You can see how it all connects. And then number 5 is you need to listen for what is not being said. If an instructor doesn't cover a subject or covers it minimally, this signals that material might not be as important as other ideas is covered in great length. That's huge. A professor might bring up a topic minimally and barely mention it. That doesn't mean that that's probably going to be on a test. So you don't want to waste your time studying and really focusing on something that was briefly mentioned. It's important to know that what those signals are that your professor is giving off on. Those signals are the ones that are going to be on your tests and are going to be on assignments. The information that's briefly mentioned is not going to be on a test. These are the things that you need to be aware of that your teacher just might mention in passing that might not be as important. So you need to know what's important in the class, what's not important. Now, in order to do that, in order to be able to grasp the material, in order to be able to really be present in the moment, and to be able to really understand the material, and to be able to know what those signals are, and to be able to know what's important and what's going to be on the test, you need to be a good active listener. So what does it mean to be an active listener? An active listener isn't a passive listener. They're not just kind of, hey, I'm in here, I'm kind of checking my phone every now and then, I'm checking, I just got a text. Oh, okay, yeah. Oh, yeah, lunch is in about 30 minutes. I wonder where we should go eat at. That's a passive listener. Oh, yeah. Oh, he just mentioned something. That's an interesting study skill. Oh, got another text. That's a passive listener. They're not really present in the moment. What they're doing is they're there. They're sitting in the class. They got their book out, right? They're sitting in there. They're every once in a while they'll take a note of something, but their mind is elsewhere. They're checking their phone. They're reading other articles. They're talking to another student. That's passive listening. Active listening is somebody who is really engaged in the moment and they're really understanding the material and really paying attention. So how do you be a good active listener? How do you be someone that's, when you're in a class, you don't leave that class saying, I was just in that class for an hour and a half and I can't remember a thing of what that professor just said. An active listener would leave that class saying, wow, okay, this is a great starting point. Now I got to work on X, Y, and Z. They have a good strategy. They have a good game plan after class leaves. So here's how to become a good active listener. Number 1, focus on what is being said. Like we already said, clear your mind. You need to be able to focus on what that professor is sharing with you or what the discussion is happening. So you're starting to see some themes here, right? When you show up into a class, you need to put work aside. You need to put, some of those other interests or, some other activities you got going on that day. You need to put that aside and you need to focus on what is being said in that moment. Be present. Number 2, repeat what you just heard. That's really important. Repeating what you heard is confirming to yourself that you're understanding the material. So you need to confirm and repeat what you said. And you can write that down or you can repeat it, to yourself. But that's an important tip. Number 3 is ask the speaker to expand or clarify if needed. So if you feel like, I'm not really grasping that material right there, it's okay to ask to clarify or to say, would you mind expanding on that piece of information you just shared? That's being present and that's you being able to understand the material. It's okay to ask questions. Don't feel bad. You should be asking questions. A good student asks questions when they are unsure. So Make sure to ask to expand or clarify if needed. Number 4, look for nonverbal signals, facial expressions, arm gestures, tone of voice. That's very important. Kind of like we talked about too. You need to be aware of these key physical expressions your professor is giving off on. That could really be important for a key term that could be on a test. Number 5, listen for requests. Sometimes the speaker will often hide a request as a statement of a problem. So, they might say an important key topic, but list it in the form of a problem. So you won't pick up on that if you're not really keeping an ear out or keeping an eye open for these requests. So you got to really pay attention. But sometimes your professor, they're going to put a key term in what seems like an unrelated problem, but it is actually related to the lecture. So whenever they bring up maybe trying to connect it with a real world issue or a different problem, be paying attention to that, because that's going to come back later. Number 6, sort the information. Decide what is important and what is not, what is clear and what is confusing, and what is new material and what is to review. That's what you need to be aware of. You need to sort the information out. This is really important because not only does this help you organize it and take better notes, but this also helps you ask better questions as well. So you need to sort the information out. Sometimes they might be reviewing material, sometimes it might be new, but you need to be able to understand what is what. Number 7, sounds simple, but take notes. This is how you're going to be a good active listener, is you need to be able to take notes. We're going to talk about that here in a bit of how to take good notes, but that's a really key important step. The last one, I already mentioned this, but it's to ask questions. And if you're going to be a good student, you need to ask questions. Of course, when you don't understand or to clarify, but asking questions is it's a huge component of being an effective listener and being a successful student. Not only does it clear doubts like I mentioned, but it allows you to take ownership of the material. It's having you critically think through it and connect it through your own words. Incredibly important. It's powerful. It's a way for you to remember the material at a later time. Ask questions. Always feel comfortable to ask questions in this class and any of your classes. Your professors want it. We want that. It shows you're paying attention. Okay, so we understand now, okay, so we see the importance of active listening. How about active reading? Because some of you here, and as you know, we have reading in this class, you're going to have reading in other classes. How to be a good active reader, how to read correctly. Some of you might read a whole piece of text and realize, what did I just read? You got to be able to know that, hey, there's a right and wrong way to read. So here's one strategy. There's a couple different strategies. One of them is called chunking. Chunking is a way, as a reading strategy, to break up the reading for what you need into more manageable parts, then check your understanding before reading some more. So, and I'm going to read this straight from the book here, but you can look at your textbook and chunk material into paragraphs or pages. If your reading material is easy to understand, you might decide that every 5 pages or so, you'll review what you covered, take notes on concepts and ideas, on what you're not sure about, and then move on to 5-page of material later. So you chunk it. You don't read 20 pages in one sitting. You'll read maybe 5 pages at a time, take notes on what you just read, write down questions you have, and then move forward. So chunking is very similar to what we talked about in time management, where you read 5 pages, take notes, maybe take a brief break, come back, read an additional 5 pages, take notes, ask questions, and keep moving forward that way. It's called chunking, and a lot of professors and a lot of students prefer that form. The other active reading strategy that really helps you to really grasp the material is called the SQ3R strategy, and I have it up here on the screen. So S for survey, Q for question, and 3R for three strategies beginning with the letter R. So the first one is survey. What can I learn from the text? What you first need to do is you need to skim the material. So when you get a new chapter, skim it all the way through. Look at the table of contents. Look at the caption headings. Look at the images. Look at the diagrams. Survey the whole chapter first and kind of get a general idea of what the chapter is going to talk about. And take notes as you're doing that of what you think are going to be some key terms as you read through the chapter. So survey the text first. I know that might sound weird, but skim the entire chapter first and find the main ideas. Number one is survey. Number two is question. What do I hope to learn from the text? So after you've surveyed it, think about what you already know about the topic and start thinking about what do you hope to learn from it. So rephrase headings into questions. Ask yourself, what did my professor say about this chapter when it was assigned? What do I already know about this topic? Right? And look at what questions the author has already formulated at the beginning or at the end of the section. So you need to kind of get into that frame of mind as, okay, now that I've surveyed the text and I'm starting to read it, before I start to read it, think of questions of how the topics in the text are going to help you figure out the information from that chapter. Okay, then we get to the last part of the strategy, which is read. Look for answers to your questions. So with this, you need to stop and reread difficult and unclear parts. Don't just keep reading. Go back and reread it if you need to. Study the tables, the graphs, the charts, and read one section at a time. Chunk it. Read a section, really focus on it, take a note on it. Read captions under images and really read it. It doesn't mean skim through it. We're not surveying anymore. We're really reading it. So now you're looking for answers to the questions that you asked before. So you already wrote questions down. Now you're reading it to find the answers to the questions that you brought up here in step 2. Now you need to recite. After you have read, now you need to recite. What do you want to remember from the information obtained? So now think about what you read and summarize the main ideas expressed in the text. If you don't understand it, reread that section. Take notes and put it into your own words. That's reciting. The last one is recall. Reread your notes and link the information with your own experiences. So it's going back, it's reviewing all the notes you've pieced together after you've surveyed, after you've questioned, after you've read and answered those questions and you've recited. Now it's time to recall. Connect what you've learned to your own experiences. That's how you're going to really be able to move forward and remembering the material, is connecting it to what you already know. Use an example. So these are some strategies to be an active reader, and that's going to help you really grasp the material. And we already kind of mentioned this. Here's some note-taking strategies. Now, this is something that I want to encourage all of you to try, not only for the rest of this class, but I want you to start incorporating these strategies right now into your courses you're doing. Some of you might already be doing some of these. If not, I want to encourage you to give some of these a try. And I think, kind of going back to what I mentioned is, I think everybody does take notes to a degree. I think, some of us, your professor might say, okay, make sure you're taking notes. So you have a piece of paper out and you're writing things down. Maybe you're drawing some pictures, but taking notes is one of the most important tools that you can have in your tool belt to be a successful student. If you can take good notes to where you can look back on it and actually comprehend what you're writing down and to be able to connect it to the material, you're going to be an excellent student. This is so, so important. So some of us, and this was me, before I got to college, this is how I took notes. But some students, they may have their laptop out, maybe they have a piece of paper, but they're, like I said, they're surfing the internet, maybe they're texting along the way, they're kind of paying attention, they might write down a key term and just put next to it, this is important, or they circle it, or they put a star next to it, and they'll say, oh, I'll remember that when I go back to it. But again, their mind is in a million other places. They're thinking about what they're going to have for lunch. They're thinking about what they're going to be doing later with their friends. They're thinking about the job that they got. They're thinking about the job that they're going to work later that day. Their mind is in a million other places. That's not going to work in college. That's not going to get you by. You're not going to pass a class with an A grade by being a note taker that has those types of habits. That's not going to work. So if you want to be successful in college, you need to be an effective note taker that supports your learning style, but you take the active listening, the active reading, and you incorporate all those skills we just talked about, but now into these specific strategies to help you remember the material better, to allow for you to test your understanding of the material, and to give you a sense of what the instructor thinks is important. You need to be able to create your ultimate study guide. Have to. So here's a couple different strategies. Here's how you can be a good note taker. Here's one of them. This is called lists, and this is pretty common. I think a lot of students take notes this way. I don't know if this would be my number one recommended strategy, but it works. Some students prefer it. But a list is a sequential listing of ideas as they're presented. So as your professor, as you're watching a video, as they're lecturing, you're just taking information down in sentence or paragraph format, detailing the information as you're hearing the material. So there's an example here on the right, and you can see they wrote well. You can see they're organized, but you can see the learning cycle, and you look here on the top sentence, the learning cycle is an approach to gathering and retaining information that can help be successful in college. The cycle consists of 4 steps, which should all be applied. So they're abbreviating in certain words here, which helps. They might put a dash here to come back to. They might star something or circle it. But the problem with this is this does require a lot of writing, and it could be difficult to keep up with a professor. So if you're focused on putting these in full, complete sentences, and you're really concerned with, okay, I want to make sure this looks really well, and I'm putting commas and periods, you could miss out on information that the professor's giving. So although lists is a way to study, that's kind of the tough part, is you could miss out on information because it takes so long to write these notes in paragraph format. So this is one way, this is one strategy to look at, is lists. This one here, I think this works. This is a really good strategy here. And this one's called the Harvard Outline Method. So there's another example here on the right. But what this does is you put the most important ideas on the left side of your page, so on the left margin, and you can number them in Roman numerals if you want to change that to something else, into symbols or whatever works best for you. But you put the main ideas on the left side of the page, and if you have more important information that's attached to those important ideas or concepts, you indent that information and you note it with capital letters for organizing. So you can see here, for example, so these are the main key ideas that this student has been writing down for the learning cycle. This is what we've been talking about in this class. Preparing is one important key concept. So you can see here they wrote down preparing. Absorbing, capturing, review, and apply. And they put a little note next to it. So preparing, setting the foundation for learning. Good. So they're understanding, hey, this is a really important key aspect. Okay. Absorbing, data input, exposure to new knowledge. Yeah. So they're defining what each of these key terms are, but they're not taking the time to write these big long sentences. They're still grasping the material and still able to listen to the professor. And then you could look down here. So now they're going into more detail of each of them. So number 1, preparing. Mental prep. So you can see, okay, what is preparing? Well, it's mental preparation. Do assignments. New knowledge is built. So you can see they're organizing it into a way of now, okay, they've talked about the key concepts. Now they're discussing each of those key concepts in more detail. But look how organized it is. So they can say, okay, preparing, it's mental prep. What's mental prep? Let's indent one more. Do assignments. New knowledge is built on prior knowledge. Within assignments, they're talking more about it here. Assignments from prior classes. Okay, so here's number 2, review syllabus. And then here's 3 key points, a part of reviewing a syllabus that are in connection with mental preparation that all falls under the umbrella of preparing. So what they're doing is they're organizing all their notes so it's easy to go back and read. Look how easy this is to go back and read. If I was taking notes this way and now I have to go study for my test, I can go back and fully grasp what that lecture was about on September 3rd. So you can see it's an organized way of studying. This is a great study skills. A lot of professors recommend this, but it really works well, especially with a computer too, if you're going to be studying and taking notes on a computer. So, this is a really important and a really great strategy is the Harvard Outline Method. And again, you can see just important ideas first on the left and then go through each of the different key points that you wrote down. Okay, number 3 is the concept map method. So this one here is a little bit more drawing involved, but what they do in this strategy is you write down the main idea in the middle. So for this week, we're talking about, study skills, right? So, maybe one of them is learning, okay? So learning is the main concept of this week. How to be an effective learner, right? How do I learn correctly? Well, once you write down the main concept here in the middle, then you can see here, you start to add lines and circles for other ideas that branch off of the main idea. So based off of learning, study habits is a key component to being an effective learner, right? So they write over here, okay, study habits is really important. And then off of study habits, they branch off these other lines here, okay? Looks like they put here, as soon as possible after class. Review. So this is an important key term based off of study habits that's branched off learning. Here's another one here too. So these are some extra key points that they thought were important based off learning. Labs, real life, rehearsal, apply new knowledge. So they're taking notes into different areas, but it's all branched off of learning. So you can still put down new ideas and new key concepts, but this is a great way for you to write down, take images, circle new ideas, and tie it back into this middle technique here. So this strategy works really well for professors that kind of go back and forth between ideas and topics. So you got to learn your professor. You got to be able to see, how does my professor lecture? And if they do transition back and forth between other ideas and topics, this is a great way to do it. So again, you write down the main topic here in the middle, and then you branch off other ideas and concepts related to the main concept. So you can see prepare, study habits, right? Applying new knowledge, record, absorb new ideas. So these are all other ideas that have their own subset pieces of information tied all back to the main concept and idea there. It's a great way to be able to understand the material. The last one here is the Cornell method. The Cornell method is probably the most commonly used form of studying. And this one here, this is a 2-column technique. So you can see here there's 2 columns, one on the left, one on the right. And think of it this way. The one on the right is where you actually take notes. So you can use any of the study methods we talked about earlier. So you can, for this one here, they're using the Harvard method here. So, they're writing down the 4 or 5 main key points up here, and then they're still taking notes the same way like we talked about here, the Harvard Outline Method. So the right column is you actually taking notes in an organized, structured method, just like we talked about with those other strategies. And then on the left column, this one's referred to as the recall. So this is for writing key ideas and concepts after reviewing and reading the material here. So once you've taken notes, then this is where you ask questions based off of your notes and tying in key concepts. So based off of the notes here, here's a couple questions they wrote down. What brain foods should I include in my diet? Based off of the information here, right? So here's something else. What is the difference between hearing and listening, right? So they have a note here on the right, absorbing information, listening, hearing with the objective of understanding. So this student said, well, okay, I understand absorbing, but they had a question here. What's the difference? That's going to help them grasp the material. So, and then here's another one. How does Jones signal something is important? So, this is important. Because like we talked about earlier, look for signals. What's each professor's signal? So you might take that. Okay, what's this professor's signal for something important? So you're taking the concepts and questions that you had from your notes and you put it here on the left. On the bottom, some students will make this kind of be a summary box where you summarize everything that you wrote down for that day and you put it into your own words. So this is a good example here. There are 4 steps to effective learning: preparing, absorbing, capturing, and reviewing. Each of these steps must be used continually to be a successful student. It's a great summary of what we've talked about this week. So this method, Cornell method, highly recommend it. It's a great way to be able to really, utilize the different note-taking strategies from what we learned about earlier and organize it into a way that summarizes, asks questions in a really clean format that you can go back to and use later. So what we just did today is we learned about how to be an effective listener, how to be an active reader, how to study and actually understand the material, not just read through it and memorize the material, but how to really grasp it and understand it. So it does, as you can see, it takes time, it takes organizing, but it's worth it in the end. And you can see how these techniques work, right? So going back to the Harvard Outline Method, it's writing down, it's studying in a completely different way. You're not just writing down random pieces of information. You're not, and maybe the best technique isn't to just write out long paragraphs. You might want to abbreviate words. You might want to write down the key concepts and then organize it from there based off of what you learned from that key concept. You might want to take down images like this, where you branch off pieces of information that are based off of your main concept. You may want to use a Cornell technique, where you're using one of those note-taking skills, but then you're organizing it too by questions and piecing together key concepts and summarizing. This is the way to study. This is the way to prepare for your classes and to be effective in your coursework. Now, before you go and watch our video on test preparation, and watch the video, it's a really great video, but I want you to think about what we've all talked about here. And a good analogy is to think about being a marathon runner. If you were to run in a marathon, you wouldn't just show up on the day of the marathon without having prepared or worked out and run a full marathon. It wouldn't happen. You wouldn't do that. It would be a disaster. You wouldn't be able to finish the marathon, right? If someone's going to run a marathon, they have to be prepared, right? They are preparing well before the event of the marathon. They're eating right. They're getting the right amount of sleep. They're actually running. So they're preparing their body physically before they run the marathon. And that's the same thing for your classes and for your tests. So before you jump into the test preparation portion, I want you to picture a marathon as your test. You don't just show up to a test and say, okay, well, I'm just going to, here we go. I'm ready to take the test. Did you study? No, I didn't study, but I've been doing the assignments and I listened to the lectures. I'll be fine. I'm sure it'll be fine. You can't do that. You're not going to do well on a test if you don't prepare, right? You can't just show up to the test. Or you can't even start studying one day before. You can't start studying for a test 2 days before. It's going to take weeks. You need to eat right. You need to sleep well. You need to be able to take good notes and review those notes and ask questions based off of your material. You need to read. You need to connect the material between what you've been watching and what you've been reading and what the notes you've been taking down and what you've been listening to connect it all together. It takes weeks of preparation for you to be able to do well on a test, just like it takes weeks, sometimes even months for a marathon to be able to prepare. So I want you to start thinking of taking tests and doing well in your courses as a marathon. You can't just show up to an event and expect to excel and succeed. Anybody that does well in a class, they're well prepared. So watch this next video on how to be well prepared for a test. And I hope you were able to take some of these study skills and be able to maybe apply this to being well prepared for a test. It's all connected. I think you're all seeing that. This class, everything's connected. It all comes back to your mindset and setting the right types of goals and time management. It's all connected. All of this is going to help you become a good student. So I hope you enjoyed this lecture. Continue watching the video this week. There's no assignment this week, but I want you to be able to watch the videos, read the material, it's important information, and participate in this week's discussion. You're doing great. Keep up the good work, and we'll talk soon. Take care.